Remember the moment when Superman, the man who had the world at his feet, decided to end Zod's life in a desperate bid to save humanity? It was one of the moments that would split fans into debate. But what if that moment had set the stage for an even more profound exploration of Superman's character? What if Man of Steel 2 had been forged from those very repercussions, submerging Superman into a world of questioning his existence? Imagine a film where the Man of Steel had not only to oppose extraneous foes, but also ghostly consequences of actions under the vision of Zack Snyder. Let's dive into what could have been the plot for Man of Steel 2. Man of Steel 2 would have reshaped the genre of superheroes and deepened the mythos of Superman. If Henry Cavill had returned for a sequel to Man of Steel, it would have been titled Man of Tomorrow, as reported by various insiders. Cavill himself said he did not view Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice as a direct sequel to Man of Steel, but more so an introduction to the Justice League. He revealed an immediate interest in a true sequel that would really flesh out Superman as a character. While conceptualizing early drafts, writers David S. Goyer and Christopher Nolan, who had just finished work on The Dark Knight Rises, kicked around a Superman tale as a first contact story. An alien god comes to Earth and changes everything. Though Zack Snyder would eventually win out as the film's director, Tony Scott had been a contender for the position at one point, indicating a Man of Steel that would have been drastically different in tone. Though Man of Steel would go on to polarize audiences compared to Batman Begins' critically reception, Warner Brothers was seeking to ramp up their response to Marvel's success. This then forced a rush with Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, as a reaction to Captain America, Civil War, and the Avengers. This benched the planned Superman sequel, which unfortunately helped to get Man of Tomorrow axed. There were different concepts for the sequel. For example, introducing Brainiac as the main villain and bringing back Kryptonians from the Phantom Zone, probably dealing with the ancient Kryptonian history, and Supergirl. Among the strongest candidates to take over the film was Matthew Vaughn, director of X-Men, First Class, and Kingsman, who wanted to do a more classical, colorful Superman. Warner Brothers passed on his take, just as it did on Christopher McQuarrie's pitch for a more lighthearted Superman story. The poor reception of Batman vs. Superman and Justice League eventually saw Warner Brothers reconsidering the need for a reboot of their DC film slate, hiring James Gunn to revamp the DC universe with Superman Legacy and a young Superman, really framing a new beginning for the franchise. Cavill's final outing as Superman came with the cameo role in Black Adam, which was excised from the final version of The Flash, thus ending his time as the character. In contrast, when Man of Steel came out in 2013, it simply didn't bring a new version of Superman. Instead, it boldly reimagined the character who, for generations, had been viewed as a near-flawless paragon of virtue. Zack Snyder's vision was dark and dirty, when added realism at a level both cheered and disparaged. Despite these, the film still provided a very solid groundwork for a new cinematic universe that held out our great promise to take Superman to newer and unexplored heights. At the center of the promise was going to be a Man of Steel 2. Initial plans for Man of Steel 2 were huge. The sequel had to be a movie that delved deep into the aftermath of events right after Superman's battle against Zod, and delved seriously into the moral and ethical dilemmas arising from his decision to kill. Snyder wanted to dive deeper into Superman's inner conflict, how to be godlike and feel responsible for it. Imagine a world still reeling from the devastation of Metropolis, where people began to question if Superman is a savior or a harbinger of doom. It is a world where the line between hero and villains blur so profoundly that Superman is forced to navigate not only the physical dangers, but also the fear and mistrust of the people he tries to save.
He has the power to wipe out the entire human race, and if we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
One of the more interesting things Snyder wanted to tackle was the wedge developing between Superman and humanity. The destruction of Metropolis had left scars that were at once physical and psychological. Some saw Superman as a Masonic figure, a protector of man, while others saw him as an existential threat, far too powerful to be trusted. This battle foreshadowed in Batman vs. Superman would have been the true heart of Man of Steel 2. The sequel would be an examination of the consequences of power, absolute in nature, the fears of those whom such power is withheld, and the paranoia ensuing from this. This would have been a film about not only Superman, but about the responses of society to the unknown and unknowable. But Man of Steel 2 wasn't only about Superman's struggle with humans. Snyder had plans to introduce new villains who would challenge Superman in unprecedented ways. One of the most talked about possibilities is the introduction of Brainiac, rumored to be played by Christopher Walken. Imagine an alien AI with an intellect way beyond human comprehension, who isn't a physical threat, but an existential one. It would have been Brainiac who would have forced Superman into a position where he would have to confront his limitations once more as a hero, as an entity with a human upbringing. This would not be another fight for survival, but for the soul of Earth, as Brainiac challenges Superman on moral, intellectual, and ethical fronts. Other possibilities for Man of Steel 2 included characters returning from the first film, but in new, unexpected ways. There were rumors of General Zod returning not as the main villain, but as a haunting presence in Superman's mind. Whether by hallucinations, by dreams, or even being simply a projection of Superman's guilt, Zod would have made his return as a psychological gauntlet. Superman would have been battling such dark inner turmoil, having to fight with the very devil of his life, killing his kind. This added level of depth to the exploration of guilt and responsibility would have made the movie not only a superhero story, but actually quite a deep character study. It wasn't just about old battles revisited or new villains. Rather, Man of Steel 2 was more about Superman's journey to become the guiding light of humanity that we all know. Snyder wanted this sequel to take Superman through crucible of doubt, fear, and mistrust, yet come out stronger, more determined, and human than ever before. While Batman vs. Superman continued the story laid out in Man of Steel, it was also a story that diverged from its standalone trajectory. The Warner Brothers change of heart to team up characters and films was based on the Marvel's Avengers and to create a rival cinematic universe. This move, however, drew attention away from the development of individual characters, which impacted in the idea of Man of Steel 2. Such a shift of focus from a solo Superman story into a larger, more populated ensemble cast had big repercussions. Batman vs. Superman and now Justice League is a story that is much more about the ensemble, the coming together of the Justice League, and the fights that are going to follow. What was promised with an introspective, character-driven narrative in Man of Steel 2 now got sidetracked for something broader and action-oriented. But what if things had been different? What if Warner Brothers had let Snyder continue his vision into Man of Steel 2? We might have seen a Superman who truly understands humanity's flaws and strengths. Another strong possibility was to further flesh out Superman's relationship with Lois Lane. At the height of a global paranoia and increasing fear of Superman, Lois would have been his anchor, the one person who reminded him of the good mankind was capable of. A relationship touched upon in Man of Steel and further developed in Batman vs. Superman could have formed a central theme for the sequel. It would have added much to the emotional side of the movie, to Superman's human side, his love for Lois, and his relationship with humanity through her. Anyway, the financial performance for both Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Justice League was mixed. Released in March 2016, Batman vs. Superman grossed around $873 million worldwide on a production budget of approximately $250 million. But the movie did not do well on Rotten Tomatoes, with a 28% approval rating, despite doing well at the box office. Justice League, which premiered in November 2017, had an estimated production budget of $300 to $350 million, but pulled in only approximately $657 million worldwide. It received even more savage reviews, with a 40% Rotten Tomatoes rating. These poor critical receptions to both films, added to mixed financial returns, set the stage for Warner Bros.' decision in the cancellation of a planned Man of Steel 2 and the reshaping of the trajectory of the DCEU. But for fans, Man of Steel 2 still remains one of the great what-ifs of the DCEU. The motion picture we didn't get a chance to see, the story was not told. Snyder's vision may never come into being, but the heritage of Man of Steel lives on and continues to inspire debate and discussion for the imagination of fans worldwide. So what do you think? Would Man of Steel 2 have been the definitive Superman movie we all wanted? Or was the DCEU right to pivot towards team-up films? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. This video was made by movie fans for movie fans.